And we are live for Thursday night football. How we doing, everyone? We got a true banger of a football game tonight between the Washington Football Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. This one is in Philadelphia, divisional matchup. First time these two teams are playing. And take note of this game because we get a rematch of this matchup in week 16 in what most leagues is the fantasy football semifinals. It's going to be a fun one, projected to be a pretty high scoring game. We will talk through that a bit. A really interesting matchup tonight. Two of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. These two teams both ranked top 4 in the NFL in rushing yards per game. The Eagles have had a much better defense than the Commanders. We'll talk through every single relevant player in this game. I'll talk through what I think is going to happen in this game. And of course, we will grind through some of the difficult Thursday night start sit questions. We might even have some time for some trade questions in the comments tonight because I know there are a lot of trades floating out there as we near the trade deadline in a lot of leagues. All right, let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles here. Jalen Hurts obviously needs to be started. Saquon Barkley absolutely needs to be started. I think there's a tier of running backs this week, and Saquon is right near the end of that tier, but he's right in that tier 1. Like Saquon to Christian McCaffrey, who we have projected as running back 1 in the WalterPicks app right now, would not be crazy for Saquon to end up being the running back 1 this week in fantasy football. We haven't seen Saquon rank as the running back 1 since week 9, just 2 weeks ago. He's done it 3 different times this season. He's been over 105 rushing yards in 3 of his last 4 games. Now he gets the Commanders, and the Commanders have allowed the most rushing yards per game to running backs this season. They've allowed the most rushing yards and the second most rushing touchdowns. This is a fantastic matchup on paper for Saquon Barkley. The Eagles are 4-point favorites in this game at home. They've allowed the most yards per carry to running backs. Devin Singletary was at 5.9. Bucky Irving almost 7 yards per carry. Chase Brown was almost at 9 yards per carry versus the Commanders. Josh Allen or Jaden Daniels, that one's definitely Josh Allen. We're going to get to the Commanders here momentarily. Talking to the Eagles right now. We're live on TikTok and YouTube right now, guys. Shout out to everybody in this live stream right now. It's going to be a fantastic Thursday night. If you're watching live on YouTube, guys, hit the like button. Hit the like. It takes you 2 seconds. I'm telling you, helps me out way more than you could possibly realize. If you're watching live on TikTok, hit the follow button and then come to the YouTube live. I'm telling you, it is a better viewing experience. Link is right in the TikTok bio. Someone asked in the YouTube live, why did Saquon go down the rest of the season rankings? Oftentimes, when guys go down in the rest of the season rankings, it has nothing to do with them. And it has everything to do with other guys moving up. We can maybe take a look at that later in the live. But Saquon's an absolute smash start tonight. He's in the tier 1 of running backs. The other thing you got to understand with the rest of the season rankings, and we're working on making this change in the WalterPicks app to show you the difference in projected points per game, because these guys there's a clear tier of running backs that are so close together. Like the difference in projection between McCaffrey and Saquon rest of the season is less than a point or 2 points per game. I mean, super close. So like the difference in ranking between certain guys, it doesn't really mean that much to me if they're projected really close together, like Saquon is with the other top running backs. But yeah, Saquon's a must start. Obviously, we're not going to talk too much about that. But again, this really could be an explosion game for Saquon. He's playing the defense that's allowing the most rushing yards per game, the defense that's allowing the most yards per carry in the NFL. And he's a 4-point favorite at home. He's coming off one of his worst games of the season last week in an even better matchup, arguably, against the Cowboys, at least in terms of fantasy points allowed. Only 8.8 points in PPR last week for Saquon. But again, he's been over 100 yards in 3 of his last 4. And it's so much of this for fantasy points comes down to, does Saquon get tackled at the 1 or not? Because when Saquon gets tackled at the 1, it's an auto TD for Jalen Hurts. Guys, Jalen Hurts, I know we talked about him briefly. Obviously, he's a must start. Guys, Jalen Hurts has 2 rushing touchdowns per game over the last month. In his last 4 games, he has 8 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he's like up there with Derrick Henry in rushing touchdowns per game. It's an automatic touchdown when the Eagles are at the 1-yard line. If there's pass interference in the end zone or they get tackled at the 1, and they have been tackled at the 1 more than every team in the NFL this season. Crazy stuff. A.J. Brown's a must start. The Commanders, they play a lot of man coverage. Over the last 2 weeks, the Commanders have been over 60% in man coverage rate. That is not going to work versus the Eagles. You got to think they adjust that down a little bit in this matchup. And if they don't, A.J. Brown's going to go over 100 yards in this game. Devontae Smith's going to have a really high ceiling in this game as well. You cannot play man coverage versus A.J. Brown and expect that to work. A.J. Brown really is having an incredible season. He's averaging 92 receiving yards per game. That's fourth most in the NFL. He's really only had one bad fantasy game. Every other game outside of week 9 versus the Jags, but that game was not close. He's had at least 13 PPR points in every game. He's 9th in fantasy points per game at 16.9. It's half a touchdown per game. He hasn't scored since week 7. Definitely has a good chance at a touchdown tonight. He obviously has to be started. Devontae Smith, I think he's probably worth it in most spots. I expect some more difficult Devontae Smith start-sit questions tonight that we'll get to. But Devontae Smith remains one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. He's only had 2 bad games this entire season. He missed week 4, so we're not going to count that against him. He's averaging over 60 receiving yards per game. He has the same amount of touchdowns as A.J. Brown this season. So, yeah, you got to feel pretty good about both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown's a must-start. Devontae Smith is a probably start. Then you get to Dallas Goedert. He's pretty sketchy, I think, in this game tonight. I think he was a true question mark. Yeah, he was for a little bit earlier in the week, an ankle injury he was dealing with. He's off the injury report. He will play tonight. He's missed a bunch of time this season. He missed 4 games. Last week, he scored, but he only had 2 catches, played 63% of snaps, only a 15% target share. And part of the problem for Devontae Smith, and even more so for Dallas Goedert, and to a lesser extent, A.J. Brown, the Eagles can skew extremely run-heavy. And there's a lot of reason that we could potentially expect that tonight. I'll get to a second reason in a second here about the Commanders' defense. But we already talked about the Commanders are allowing the most rushing yards per game in the NFL. The Eagles are crushing in terms of rushing yards per game. I think they are number 1 or number 2 in that stat. I'm pulling it up right now. Yeah, they're number 2, only behind the Ravens. They're 6 yards per game behind the Ravens, to put that in perspective. Really close behind the Ravens in terms of rushing yards per game. They get the worst rushing yards per game allowed defense, the most yards per carry defense tonight. So it's possible they do skew run heavy, especially if they get a lead. And we've seen that at times this season. Guys, Jalen Hurts, his pass attempts per game are at 26.1. That's 34th most in the NFL. For those of you at home counting, there's only 32 teams in the NFL. We've seen games where Jalen Hurts only threw 14 pass attempts, 20 pass attempts. I mean, this is extremely low. We have not seen Jalen Hurts throw more than 25 pass attempts since week 4. It's been almost 2 months since we've seen Jalen Hurts have any type of reasonable pass volume. I mean, they're extremely efficient when they're passing because of the receivers they have and because defenses are playing to stop the run. But it's definitely possible we see another low-volume passing offense from the Eagles tonight in this matchup, especially when you consider the Commanders' defense and their strength this season has been getting pressure on the quarterback. The Commanders are getting pressure on the quarterback at the second highest rate in the NFL this season. And this is the really one spot where Jalen Hurts has really struggled this year. Under pressure this season, he's at 5.8 yards per pass attempt. On the season, overall, he's at 8.4. Jalen Hurts' yards per pass attempt this season overall ranks 5th best in the NFL, but when under pressure, he ranks 21st. And he's been under pressure actually a decent amount. Career high, 43% of his dropbacks, he's been under pressure this season. All these stats are from Sharp Football Analysis. Shout out to them for pulling all this data. But man, this is definitely the key for the Commanders to stop the Eagles' offense. But they first have to force the Eagles to throw. And I think this is even more reason to potentially expect a run-heavy attack from the Eagles tonight. The Commanders have successfully gotten a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and they have been killed in the run game, where the Eagles have really, really succeeded and arguably the best or second best offensive line in the NFL behind the Lions. So that's the Eagles offense. So I feel a little scared about Dallas Goedert for the pass volume reasons. He only had 2 catches last week. I'm not convinced there's going to be huge pass volume in this game. The Commanders are about average versus tight ends. I think there's a lot of better tight end options out there. I would play Taysom Hill over Dallas Goedert this week, for example. We've been on the Taysom Hill train now for 3 straight weeks, but definitely still a ceiling for Taysom. I'd argue his ceiling is much higher than Goddard's in this game. None of the other Eagles obviously are playable, though I will note we do got an interesting revenge game if you scroll down enough in the start-sit tool. Jahan Dotson, interesting revenge game narrative for him here. I know you probably haven't thought about Jahan Dotson literally since before the season, but we get Jahan Dotson versus the team that traded him away, and he is playing more than 40% of snaps. You're going to see Jahan Dotson tonight, and I would wager he's probably getting at least one catch. He's had back-to-back games, actually, with at least one catch and at least 25 yards. I think you see Jahan Dotson get at least one chance at a big play tonight, if not multiple. Would not shock me to see him make a big play and score in this game. I think he's an interesting dart throw in the player props. He's not the free player prop of the night, but interesting revenge game narrative there. All right, that's the Eagles. Kenneth Gainwell is just a desperation throw if you really need a running back. We will get to him a little bit later on, too. I do think he'll have a role tonight. All right, Commanders. On to the Commanders. Again, we just talked about the Eagles. We're going to talk about the Commanders. Then we're going to get to the free player prop of the night, what I think is going to happen in the game. And then we're going to grind through start-sits. And we're going to get to trade comments tonight, too, because I know the trade deadline's coming up in a lot of leagues, and you got to be making the right trade decisions. The trade decisions are make or break in fantasy. Week 11, Thursday night, we got Commanders and Eagles. Eagles 4-point favorites tonight, 50-point over-under. Projected a lot of points. I honestly would lean towards the under a little bit there for some of the things we were just talking about, where the Eagles could skew really run-heavy tonight, though it's possible the Eagles score 30+, mostly through the run game. Definitely possible. And also, if the Commanders play man coverage, that it's going to go over. I think there's a wide range of outcomes in this game, because we've seen flashes from the Commanders' offense. So I expect a lot of Jaden Daniels start-sit questions tonight. I'm already seeing some in the YouTube Live and the TikTok Live. Shout out to everybody in this live stream right now, by the way. It's going to be a great Thursday night. Good vibes. I'm sending good vibes to all of you. Hit the like button if you're watching live on YouTube. Helps me out a ton. Hit the follow button if you're watching live on TikTok. Seriously, guys, appreciate you guys all so much. But Jaden Daniels, he's having an incredible season. And he's cooled off a little bit from the first month. I mean, guys, I think after week 4, we had Jaden Daniels ranked as QB1 rest of the season. It was because of the rushing. He's leading all these rushing metrics. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. He had 4 rushing touchdowns in his first 4 games. We have not seen Jaden Daniels score a rushing touchdown since week 4. I mean, the rushing touchdowns have fallen off, not the rushing yards. He still has 3 games in that span with at least 50 rushing yards. Last week was by far his worst rushing game of the season. Only 5 rushing yards. I mean, the Steelers' defense is legit, but this Eagles' defense has been pretty good. I think this is where these two teams differ a lot, because the Commanders, they actually have been really effective running the ball this season too, partially because of Jaden Daniels and what he opens up for the running backs, partially because Brian Robinson has played well. But the defense for the Commanders is just not comparable to the defense for the Eagles, and I think that's where they get the edge tonight, and ultimately why they're favored in this game, why I expect them to win this game. We have not seen a real ceiling from Jaden Daniels really since week 4. He has not finished as a top 8 fantasy football quarterback since week 4. Guys, it's been more than 2 months since Jaden Daniels has ranked top 8 among fantasy football quarterbacks in any individual week. The passing upside is just not that high because they skew pretty run heavy on this offense too. Jaden Daniels, we just looked at Jalen Hurts, who was averaging 26.1 pass attempts per game, which ranked 34th in the NFL among quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels, he ranks 33rd. They're both outside the top 32 in pass attempts per game. There's just not a huge amount of games where the pass volume's that high. I do think there's an outcome tonight where Jaden Daniels is forced to throw a bit more and the ball is in his hands a bit more. Underdogs in the division against the Eagles tonight. There's definitely still a ceiling for Daniels. I do not think Daniels is a must bench by any means. I don't think he's a must start though. And there's some quarterbacks I would definitely start over him. I would start Justin Herbert over him this week. I think that one's pretty close. Let me actually pull up the week ranks here. Yeah, I would go Justin Herbert. I would go Russell Wilson. I'd go Joe Burrow and Brock Purdy all over Jaden Daniels this week. I would also play Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar over Jaden Daniels. That's the end of the list. That is Jaden Daniels. I'm playing Daniels over Stroud, over Bo Nix, over Mahomes. I'm playing Daniels over Jordan Love, Drake May, Geno Smith, those guys. So in a lot of leagues, you can start him, but I'm not starting him over Jalen Hurts. I'm not starting him over Josh Allen. I'm not starting him over Brock Purdy, who's been on fire. Brock Purdy's been way better for fantasy than Jaden Daniels over the last month and has an easier matchup tonight. The Eagles are allowing the 5th fewest points per game to quarterbacks this season. Baker Mayfield, the only quarterback to go over 22 fantasy points. We saw Trevor Lawrence do it. But really, since the bye week for the Eagles, they've been crushing teams. They also have played basically nobody. I mean, they played Deshaun and Jameis. They played Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. The Joe Burrow, they held to a pretty good game. He only had 14 fantasy points. That's the best QB they played. Trevor Lawrence, he scored 22 fantasy points, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns that game. He only threw for 169 yards. He only completed 50% of his passes. So that's a good game from the Eagles defense there too. So yeah, there's an interesting floor and ceiling story you could tell around Jaden Daniels tonight. I think he's a good start, not a must start in all situations. He's a top 8 QB projected this week, even though he hasn't finished as a top 8 QB in multiple months. All right, on to the next best commander tonight, which is Terry McLaurin, who I'm also a little bit nervous about in this game. Again, I think the Commanders could end up skewing a little run heavy tonight. I think they sort of have to throw in this game, though, with how good the Eagles have been against the run. And there has not been very many wide receivers as consistent for fantasy football than Terry McLaurin. Guys, he scored at least 15 points in every single game since week 6. He hasn't been under 13 points since week 2. He ranks 15th best in points per game at 15. He's averaging 71 yards per game. That's 11th best in the NFL. He's top 10 in touchdowns per game. He's got multiple games with multiple touchdowns. He's got the 6th highest percentage of air yards. He's seeing deep targets too. His skill set just meshes so well with Jaden Daniels. So Terry McLaurin, I didn't put him in the must-start category tonight because he ranks outside the top 20 receivers in projections, and this isn't the best matchup for him. But he's a good start. You should feel pretty good about starting Terry McLaurin basically every single week. His prop lines are in the 60s tonight. You should feel pretty good about that. Next up is Brian Robinson Jr., and I'm pretty nervous to start him tonight. I think with the bye weeks this week, the other running back options, you're kind of forced to start him in some leagues. You know, like him versus Rico Dowdle, for example, I think is pretty close. I might lean Rico with the report we heard about that today. You know, that one's closed. We haven't seen Brian Robinson play since week 8 versus the Bears. He got hurt in that game. He's back tonight. He's dealing with a hamstring injury, which is always a little bit scary, but he's off the injury report. He should be playing tonight. It's just the matchup's not good versus the Eagles. They're the 3rd best defense in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs this season. Guys, we have not seen a single big fantasy game versus the Eagles. Bijan Robinson, he only had 16 points. You know, that's not bad. But Bijan, 16 points. What does that mean for Brian Robinson? Alvin Kamara only had 16 points. Josh Jacobs only had 12. Rashad White, Bucky Irving both went under 13 points. Those are the best games versus the Eagles. Again, they haven't played the best offenses, the best running backs. But I wouldn't define Brian Robinson Jr. as one of the best running backs. The Eagles rank 8th best in yards allowed to running backs, 4th best in touchdowns allowed to running backs, 4th best in receiving yards allowed to running backs. Yeah, I'm scared to start Brian Robinson Jr. tonight. I think he's startable. I'm just a little scared to start in this matchup. And then Austin Eckler, I think, is must-bench territory. With Brian Robinson Jr. back, just a little bit scary. He's had back-to-back good games, over 17 points. He scored 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Part of the reason both Brian Robinson and Eckler are pretty risky tonight is they're going to split work in this backfield. And don't think Jeremy McNichols is going anywhere either. He's probably going to get work in his backfield too. Chris Rodriguez was mixing in with B-Rob out. B-Rob's been out, but we've seen McNichols mix in when both these guys are healthy so far this season. So it's like a 2-headed backfield with a breather back involved as well. And the matchup's tough. And in both guys can end up getting some of the receiving work. Eckler probably gets more receiving work than B-Rob tonight, but both guys are pretty risky in this matchup ultimately. Like I'm seeing a question in the TikTok live right now about Brian Robinson or Devontae Smith. I think that was pretty obviously Devontae Smith in my opinion. Jaden Daniels or 2, I'm going Daniels there for sure. And that's it. Those are all the fantasy guys you should really be considering. Don't start Zach Ertz tonight. That's the other revenge game narrative. We got Jahan Dotson revenge game tonight versus the Commanders. I think he probably beats his prop line of like 9 yards. He's been over 25 yards back-to-back games, actually. He's playing over 40% of the snaps for the Eagles. Mostly wind sprints, this season for Jahan Dotson, which is to be expected playing alongside A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. But I do think there's an interesting revenge game narrative for him. Zach Ertz, obviously, a longtime Eagle. Not too much of a revenge game story to tell there. I think it's all love for Zach Ertz and Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think that he actually wants revenge necessarily. It'll just feel weird probably playing against the Eagles for him. But Zach Ertz actually has a massive role in this offense, which is why I'm sure there's going to be some Zach Ertz start-sit questions. That he had 8 targets last night. At face value, you're not looking at the name or the player. You see 8 targets, you're going to consider starting that tight end in fantasy. Just a couple of weeks before that, he had 11 targets. He went for a 32% target share in that game versus the Bears, but he only scored 14 points. There is just not a real ceiling for Zach Ertz. He's a pure floor play at tight end, which means like 5 to 8 points. I mean, he had 7 points last week, 4 catches, 31 yards. I would project a similar stat line for him tonight. We got him projected for 3 catches, 29 yards in the WalterPicks app and less than half a touchdown. The Eagles have been very good versus tight ends this season. We've not seen any good tight end performances, really. Cade Otton had the best game, I think. Gesicki had 7 for 73. First then, that was the best tight end performance we've seen, but they held Evan Ingram under 12 points. Jake Ferguson last week only had 4 points. Cooper Rush wasn't able to do anything. And Njoku only had 8 points. Cade Otton only had 11 points. Pitts only had 5 points. Kraft only had 6 points. Not that they haven't played good tight ends. So that's the Commanders. I think Daniels a good start, not a must start. McLaurin a good start, not a must start. Brian Robinson and Eckler kind of sketchy starts, but they're not must benches in a lot of leagues, in a lot of running back situations in a lot of leagues. Terry or D-Hop, I think I lean D-Hop versus Terry. I think that one's actually close. Let's take a look at this. I'll get to the free player prop next. Yeah, it's D-Hop over Terry. I was only a little hesitant because Juju's going to be back this week, and I am curious how that's going to impact D-Hop, but it probably won't impact him much. I think Hopkins is definitely better than Juju. I think I would go Hopkins in that game over McLaurin tonight. And that's part of the reason I don't have McLaurin as a must start. I think there are players I would start over Terry McLaurin. I would include guys, by the way, like Calvin Ridley. I think I would start over Terry McLaurin. Ridley's in an incredible role for the Titans in a pretty good matchup, at least on paper, this week versus the Vikings. George Pickens for sure. I would start over McLaurin. I would start George Pickens over Devontae Smith too. I don't think I'd have the guts to start him over A.J. Brown, but I would at least think about it. I mean, a smash spot for Pickens versus the Ravens this week. We just saw Jamar Chase absolutely smash versus the Ravens, who have struggled in secondary all season. All right, so that's every player in this game. The Commanders have the tougher matchup offensively tonight. Again, the Eagles defense has been good. We were just looking at it. They ranked top 5. They ranked 5th best versus quarterbacks in fantasy points allowed, 10th best in against receivers in fantasy points allowed, 3rd best versus running backs in fantasy points allowed, and 3rd best versus tight ends. I mean, they are top 10 against every single position. This has been a good Eagles defense. In Eagles defense, mind you, don't forget, I think it has been forgotten a little bit because of how the season has gone. This Eagles defense was awful last season. It was one of the most pass funnel defenses in the NFL last year. Their secondary was absolutely torched, and it's part of the reason they really never had a chance to make a Super Bowl run, because they were not going to be able to stop these elite quarterbacks. And this season, they've done much better. They have played really bad QBs. This will be one of their toughest tests. They did stop Joe Burrow. They did pretty well versus Trevor Lawrence, for what that's worth. I don't know if he even counts as a good or okay quarterback these days. But this is the second toughest matchup they've had in the last couple of months versus Jaden Daniels. So that is the quick recap of every single player. I think the Eagles win this game. I'd probably take the Commanders +4 if you were taking spreads, but I do think the Eagles money line's not a bad move either. Again, just to recap, I think the Eagles are going to be really run heavy tonight. I still want to start A.J. Brown. I still think Devontae Smith's startable and they can make big plays. But the Commanders, they rank 4th highest in man coverage rate this season. I think that they have to change that tonight. I don't think they can stick to man coverage tonight, or they will get crushed by A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But where the Commanders have some hope is they rank 2nd best in pressure rate this season. And these things do go hand in hand to some extent. It's easier to pressure sometimes in man coverage. Hurts, though, has really struggled under pressure this season. He ranks 21st in the NFL in yards per attempt when pressured, and he's been pressured on a career-high 43% of dropbacks this season. And the Commanders, they've been really effective at getting pressure. Again, 2nd best pressure rate in the NFL. Jalen Hurts, he ranks 5th best in yards per attempt overall and 21st when pressured. So that's the formula, I think, for the Commanders defense. But they first have to get the Eagles to throw the ball. The Eagles, who Jalen Hurts ranks 34th in pass attempts among quarterbacks this season. There's only 32 teams, guys. Let me pull it up. We'll pull up. Let's see what quarterbacks he's behind in terms of pass attempts. We got this new feature in the WalterPicks app here. We can sort and see the rankings list behind some of these stats. So yeah, Jalen Hurts, he's behind Jaden Daniels. He's behind Derek Carr. He's behind Jacoby Brissett. He's behind Andy Dalton. This is in terms of pass attempts per game. He's behind Justin Fields, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Gardner Minshew, Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, Lamar. All these guys have way more pass attempts per game. He's just ahead of Drake May and Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. Again, he ranks 34th. But the Commanders, they rank dead last in rushing yards allowed per game. They rank dead last in yards per carry allowed. I would go Judy over Brian Robinson this week. I think Judy's a good sleeper this week. Him and Cedric Tillman, I think, are like pretty comparable options this week. Everyone loves Cedric Tillman. He's been the better receiver since Winston took over and over like the last month or so. But it wouldn't be that shocking to see Judy still sort of take over that wide receiver one role for the Browns. I think that's what they sort of expect him to be after that Amari Cooper trade still. They're coming out of the bye. Really good matchup for that whole offense versus the Saints this week. I'd go Downs, I think, still over Brian Robinson Jr. too. I lean towards the under because of both teams skewing towards the rushing in this game and how good the Eagles defense has been. Ravi, let's go. I am. I'm speaking at someone's fantasy football club. Very excited for that. Sam, rate this trade. I traded Terry for Joe Mixon. Yeah, I'd probably give this a 10 out of 10. I don't know how this would really rank anything less. Joe Mixon is a top 5 running back in fantasy football right now. He projects his running back for this week. He gets a great matchup here versus the Cowboys, but he's second in fantasy points per game. There's very, very few players at this point in the season who have not had a bad game. And Joe Mixon is on that short list. I mean, I can't off the top of my head think of another player that you can say that about. Joe Mixon has not had a bad game. He's been over 15 points in every single game, and the role is incredible for Mixon. B. Robert Sutton, I think I'd lean Sutton there. Joe Burrow over Jaden Daniels. Here's the QBs I'm playing over Jaden Daniels tonight. Let me pull this up on the wall on the YouTube Live. Guys, we're live on TikTok and YouTube. Shout out to everybody in the YouTube Live right now. Hit the like button. I do appreciate it. If you're watching live on TikTok, smash the follow button. We're just getting started here. We're still about to get into the start-sit segment on this live. We're going to get to as many start-sits as we possibly can. If I don't get to start-sit, I won't be able to get to all of them. I'll try to get to a lot of them, especially the harder ones. Download the WalterPicks app. It's a free app in the YouTube description, in the TikTok bio. Use code SAM when you sign up. That does help me out. Do appreciate it. It's going to help you with start-sits, with fantasy, and with player props. Still got to get to the free player prop tonight, too. There is one that I like. So I'm starting Lamar, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, and Justin Herbert, all over Jaden Daniels. That's the end of the list, though. And I think Russ, Herbert, Daniels, they're all pretty close, like really close. Yeah, I mean, these are all similar tier guys. I think this week you could make an argument for Daniels over these guys because of the rushing. His prop line is in the 40s for the rushing tonight. I do think we see Jaden Daniels run, much better than he did last week. He'll need a career low 5 rushing yards last week for Daniels. He still ranks though, top 3? Yeah, number 2 in rushing yards per game. He's number 2 still behind Lamar Jackson. He really does look a lot like Lamar out there. I know he doesn't want that comparison, but it's a pretty good comparison for him. All right, let's get to the free player prop of the night, and then we can grind through the start sits for the rest of the live. So the free player prop is a guy I actually haven't really talked too much about on this live yet. Debo versus Terry. I would go Debo, I think, over Terry too. That one's pretty close. We'll do that comparison maybe in a sec. But the free player prop tonight, it is, and by the way, we've been smashing these free player props. We're at 63% this season. It is Kenneth Gainwell. Over 13.5 rushing yards. Now, hear me out on this one. This one, these types of props can be a little sketchy sometimes. How many carries will Kenneth Gainwell really get? Well, I think there's an outcome tonight where he gets close to 10 carries. I think that's possible. I think that's within the range of outcomes tonight. I don't think that's the base projection, obviously, for Kenneth. Tonight, we've seen him get 13 carries in a game this season back in week 7 versus the Giants. That game wasn't close. Last week, he had 7 carries. The 2 weeks before that, he had 5. I think he only needs a couple carries to hit this line, guys. Again, the Commanders are allowing the most rushing yards per game to running backs in the NFL. They're allowing the highest yards per carry to running backs in the NFL. That's what this prop is really about. He's had at least 5 carries in 4 straight games. And guys, if he gets at least 5 carries in this game, he only needs to get to 3 yards per carry. And they're allowing 5.1 yards per carry this season. And he's averaging 4.2 yards per carry. We just need at least 5 carries. Again, he's done that in 4 straight games. Short week. How big of a role are they really going to put on Saquon's shoulders? And I love Saquon tonight for all the same reasons. But I still think we see Gainwell get at least a few carries. I mean, the floor for me, I think, in carries, I would be pretty shocked if Gainwell doesn't get at least 3. At least 3. And again, I think there's an outcome where the Eagles are up by a decent bit. They're 4-point favorites at home. The Commanders might not be able to stop the run in this game. They haven't successfully stopped the run very much this season. The Eagles defense could perform decent versus this Commanders offense. The Eagles defense has been good. They played pretty bad opponents, but they have been good this season. It's one of those things when you play enough bad teams, in sports, it's like you can make that excuse that maybe the Eagles defense isn't that good, but they played well. I mean, what do you want them to do? They don't get to choose their opponents. They played great versus the bad teams. I'd rather them play great versus the bad teams than play bad versus the bad teams. But yeah, I do think this Gainwell prop is the best value of the night. I like this one over 13.5 rushing yards a lot. All right, that is the free player prop of the night. We are 27-16 on the free player props of the season at 63%. My goal is to get over 65% on the season. We've been right around there in past seasons. We'll see if we can do it. Obviously, a very difficult challenge there. All right, let's get to the start-sit questions now. It's going to be a fun game tonight, guys. We got a great one, really, between the Commanders, the Eagles, divisional matchup, a preview of a matchup that we're going to see again in the fantasy football semi-finals, repping Bomber Soccer. Yeah, we got the Ithaca Soccer shirt on tonight. I'm always a Bomber. Once a Bomber, always a Bomber. All right, let's get to Ingram or Goddard. Yeah, I think it's Ingram. I think it's Ingram over Goddard. Eckler or Etienne? Yeah, I think it's Etienne over Eckler. I think there's a good chance Bigsby doesn't play this week. Even if he does, he's a little banged up. Devontae Smith or Tillman and CJ or Nix. We'll get to the Thursday night one here. We're prioritizing the Thursday night start hits because, guys, we're going to be live for over 3 hours on Sunday morning. We'll have time to get to this CJ versus Nix question, which actually is close. We have them projected 0.1 points apart this week. A very difficult decision. So let's let that one stew for a little bit longer, and we can think through that. I think my gut is CJ with Nico back, but Bo Nix is an interesting spot this week. Yeah, it's Devontae Smith over Cedric Tillman. I get wanting to start Tillman. He's an interesting option this week, a good option this week. I think him and Judy are good options this week. I do think the Saints defense is bad, and I think their secondary is bad, and they're without Marshawn Lattimore now. I don't think we've seen official confirmation if Lattimore's in or out tonight. Najee Harris is going to play. I'm seeing that report. Let me look this up. I don't know if anyone in the comments knows. I don't think it really changes too much for fantasy decisions. No, he's out. He's out tonight. Marshawn Lattimore out again tonight. Yeah, Lattimore is out. That only makes me like the Eagles receivers more. But I would have liked them, I think, either way. You think I start Brian Robinson or McConkey? It's McConkey. Yeah, I think if you have a good option in a good matchup, I would bench B-Rob. I would bench Eckler. I would bench Goddard. Let's go through the tight ends I'm starting over Goddard because it's a pretty long list. Tonight, obviously, Kelsey. Kittle, if he plays, it does seem like Kittle's going to play. So I would hold out hope for Kittle. Mark Andrews. This is a projection without Isaiah Likely. Right now, I kind of think Likely is going to play. Let's see the latest on Likely. Massive implications there, obviously, for Mark Andrews, who had a season-high snap percentage. He returned to practice after missing all 3 last week. He was limited for today's practice. Obviously, a good step in the right direction. Maybe Andrews doesn't play, though. He projects as tight end 3 right now. Bowers and Njoku, Ingram, I play over Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. While we're at it, Taysom Hill, I'm playing over both guys. Kyle Pitts, I'm playing over both guys. Hunter Henry, I'm playing over both guys. TJ Hawkinson, I'm playing over both guys. Tucker Kraft, Dalton Schultz, Will Dissly. Then we get into Dallas Goedert territory. I would play Will Dissly over Dallas Goedert. This is why these guys are must benches. I should have put Dallas Goedert in the must bench category. Looking deeper at this, Dallas Goedert versus Will Dissly is a real tough decision, I think, this week. And I think there's a good argument for Will Dissly. Obviously, Goedert's got the name value. But again, we talked about it when we started, open the live, talking about this Eagles offense. Jalen Hurts is only 30% to play. I don't know where you're getting that percentage from, if that was like a report that I missed or not. I'll look at that in a second. I thought it was pretty positive reporting on George Kittle. Let me see. Yeah, he hasn't practiced, but they've been speaking positively about it. I think is the Kittle stuff. Tough call. I still think I'd probably hold out hope if you have Goddard. You could probably just go get Dissly for free on the waiver wire. The problem for Dallas Goedert is the Eagles, their pass volumes can go really, really low on Fantasy Pros. Yeah, that's just pure speculation. Pure speculation. I think it's higher than 30% for Kittle. I would probably put it at like 55, 60%. Have not done a DraftKings lineup yet, but I would definitely have Saquon in the captain slot tonight with this matchup. That's my biggest piece of DraftKings advice on the one-game slate tonight. But yeah, I think you got to bench Goddard. I think benching Zach Ertz makes a lot of sense. We actually done back-to-back in the projections this week. Revenge game for Ertz tonight. Also a revenge game for Jahan Dotson tonight. Eagles or Dolphins defense? Yeah, it's Dolphins. It's Dolphins defense. I don't want either defense really tonight. This game does have a really high over-under. I think it probably goes under, but it does have a really high over-under, right around 50 points. One of the higher of the week, actually. Yeah, it's Taysom. It's Taysom over Goddard. And then Terry, James Cook, Jaden Reed, Najee Harris, Jacoby Myers. Man, this one's close. Not a good spot for James Cook this week. I mean, the game environment should be good for Cook, but no running backs have had success versus the Chiefs this entire season. I mean, we just haven't seen it. Jaden Reed comes back versus the Bears. He should be about as healthy as we've seen this season. We got him projected pretty low, though, in a tough matchup versus the Bears. I would play Terry over Reed. Let's pull up Myers here. I think he might actually be close. I think this one's Terry. Pull up James Cook here too. Yeah, it's Terry here. I'm playing Terry McLaurin over James Cook. I'm playing him over Jacoby Myers. I'm seeing one in the TikTok live. Terry McLaurin or Cortland Sutton. And Sutton's been balling. After his donut, he had 0 points for the first time ever in his career. He didn't have a single target for the first time. And then he rips off 3 straight games over 17 points. 3 straight games with at least 6 catches and 70 yards. Scored a touchdown last week too. He's up to 12 points per game this season, which is still not, great. The Falcons allowing 22 points per game this season. That's the second fewest. Man, I think you gotta have to go Sutton here. It's pretty close. I want to pull this up real quick. Yeah, I think you go Sutton. I think it's Sutton. What's up, Sam? Hope all is well. Do I start Devontae Smith and Hurts over Russ in my other league? It's Hurts over Russ for sure. It depends who you're starting Devontae Smith over, but yeah, you do want to start Devontae Smith. Not starting over George Pickens. George Pickens right now, he ranks wide receiver 3 in the WalterPicks app. He's ahead of Jefferson and Brown. I don't think I would have the guts to start George Pickens over Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown in my fantasy leagues. Nobody has to make that decision, hopefully. But yeah, you're not benching Pickens versus the Ravens. Absolutely not. You just can't do it. Hey, Sam, got a tough one tonight. Do I go Devontae Smith, Zay Flowers, ETN, Chubb, or Ladd at flex? I think off the cuff, it's Zay over Devontae Smith. Let's take a look at this one. Tough matchup for Zay this week. Definitely a better matchup on paper for Devontae Smith tonight, assuming the Eagles have some reasonable pass volume, which I do not think is a lock. Ladd projects well this week too. Man, these guys are close. Yeah, this is a very difficult decision. I think I would go both these guys over Devontae Smith, though. Both Ladd McConkey and Zay Flowers over Devontae Smith. And this is part of the reason I didn't put Devontae Smith in the must-start category, even though a lot of weeks I really do think about Devontae Smith as must-start. It's not a bad matchup. If the Commanders play man coverage in this game, Devontae Smith can definitely ball. He is coming off an injury, Devontae Smith, hamstring injury, good to go for week 11. I think he had a season low snap percentage last week, 72%. Yeah, that was a season low. 15% target share. He's now been below a 17% target share in 3 of his last 5 games. He's only had 2 bad games this whole season, but those 2 bad games came in the last 4. So over the last month has been under 4 points. And again, this really, I think, has a lot to do just with the pass volume for the Eagles, not Devontae Smith himself. I'm more confident in the pass volume for the Chargers than I am for the Eagles this week. So yeah, I think it's Flowers or McConkey there. Flowers projects the best, but I am a little scared about this whole Ravens offense a little bit versus the Steelers. The Steelers have historically done pretty well versus Lamar, who's still a must-start himself, obviously. Ingram or Goddard, yeah, you're benching Goddard for basically every single tight end option you're going to ask about. I have Kupp, Adams, and Terry. Who do I start? Yeah, you don't start Terry. You start Kupp. Devontae Smith or Devontae Adams or Ridley. That one's close. Brian Robinson Jr. or Chase Brown or Kenneth Walker, full PPR. Not a Thursday. Oh, this is a Thursday night. Yeah, it's Chase Brown here. Chase Brown had, 9 catches last week or something ridiculous like that? Is it 9? Am I remembering that right? Or am I imagining things? Chase Brown, off the top of my head, I called it 9 catches, man. This is where the point. I'm locked in, man, at this point in the season. 9 catches, 52 yards. How many running backs? Think about it. Count in your head how many running backs can get to 9 catches in a game. I can think of 2, maybe 3. And suddenly Chase Brown's on that list. It's Kamara, McCaffrey, maybe Achane. I don't know if any of those guys have even hit 9 catches this season. Is there another running back that has 9 catches this season? I'm not so sure. And he probably, he's not going to get 9 again, most likely. But the fact that he has that ceiling receiving-wise, most receivers, guys, don't get to 9 catches yet. Kamara has no games with 9 catches this season. McCaffrey obviously has played 1 game. He hasn't done it. Achane, I don't think, has done it. He's got to be the only running back. Achane had 8, so he was close. But yeah, I mean, crazy role that we're seeing Chase Brown in right now. Khalil Herbert probably will mix in more, but Chase Brown's like just the workload alone makes him a must start in fantasy right now. Devontae Smith or Shakir. Yeah, so Amari Cooper is supposedly going to be back this week. It seems like Kincaid might be out. Let's do Devontae Smith, Shakir, and McLaurin to get to some more of these start-sit questions that I'm sure people have. Hey, Sam, answer please, bro. Jane Daniels or Herbert? Yeah, it's Herbert over Daniels for me this week. I do want to start Herbert this week. Such a better matchup for Herbert this week. And Herbert's been balling. Jane Daniels, he's had a good floor in fantasy, but we haven't really seen the ceiling since the first month of the season. He hasn't been a top 8 fantasy football quarterback over the last 2 months in a single week. I don't think Justin Herbert has either, but I'm more confident in him this week than I am Jane Daniels, at least the ceiling. Yeah, so it's McLaurin, then Devontae Smith, then Khalil Shakir. I think that's reasonable. I do like Shakir. I mean, Shakir's been really consistent. At least 11 points in 4 straight games, at least 6 catches in 4 straight games. Season high snap percentage last week. 25% target share too. And this game versus the Chiefs is gonna be high scoring. I mean, these Bills Chiefs games get crazy. But I still think it's probably Terry tonight. Terry McLaurin deserves to be started in most leagues. He does. He's been over 15 points, guys, for 5 straight games. He's had at least 15 points in 7 of his last 8 games. He's over 13 points in 8 consecutive weeks. I mean, you just don't see that in fantasy football these days. Devontae Adams or Terry McLaurin, after hyping up McLaurin there for a second, yeah, it's Adams, I think. And Adams hasn't practiced yet this week, which makes this question a little bit harder. But assuming Adams plays, yeah, he's a better option in that matchup versus the Colts. Eckler or Watson, like there's a much better chance Adams eclipses a 30% target share and has like 10 plus targets than McLaurin tonight. Devontae Adams or Terry McLaurin, yeah, it's Adams. Mooney or Tillman, need ASAP for Thursday Night Football. Love the help. I got you. I got every single one of you in this live. I'm going to get to as many start-sits as I can. I live for the start-sit segments. Nobody's attacking start-sits like me on these lives. I appreciate all of you guys that are tuned in right now. It's going to be a fun Thursday night. Hit the like button if you haven't yet on the YouTube live. It seriously helps me out way more than you realize. If you're watching live on TikTok, guys, smash the follow button. I do appreciate it. Mooney versus Tillman. Need ASAP for Thursday Night Football. This is not a Thursday Night Football question. It's not. You tricked me here. I don't like that. But I'll answer it nonetheless because I pulled it up. I want to answer it. I think it's probably Mooney over Tillman. Tillman definitely is the better matchup. Yeah, I'd go Mooney over Tillman. Daniels or Wilson? Yeah, so I think that one's really close. So I think the QBs that are really close tonight. So I'm starting Lamar, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Joe Burrow, all over Jane Daniels, like pretty easily, honestly. And then Russ and Justin Herbert, I personally would start them over Jane Daniels, but it's close. And I think there's a good argument on both sides of that start sit because Daniels does have much more rushing floor, obviously, than Herbert and Russ, and then definitely Burrow and Purdy. Purdy's been running a bit. But Jane Daniels, number 2 quarterback in rushing yards per game this season. Oh, man, Mooney popped up on the injury report today. I did not catch that. I think that changes the answer, but at least it's not a Thursday night question, that one specifically. Yeah, so I personally would go Russ and Herbert. They just have amazing matchups. Two guys with top 4 matchups this week. And both guys are playing really well right now, too. And Jane Daniels, again, I think the floor is there, the rushing's there, and he's a good option this week. And in a lot of leagues, you should be starting Jane Daniels. He's had at least 19 points in 7 of his 10 games this season. 70% of the games, Jane Daniels is getting you at least 19. But he hasn't ranked as a top 8 quarterback since week 4. So the floor's been there. He's been getting you about a consistent 20. He's had 2 games under 10. I think one of those he got hurt. Yeah, that Panthers game was the one he got hurt, so we shouldn't count that one. Really only one game that was bad, and that was against the Steelers, one of the best defenses in the NFL. But this is arguably the second toughest matchup he's had this season after the Steelers. Maybe the Bears defense is a little bit better. It's hard to know exactly because the Eagles have had a decently easy schedule so far. This is one of the harder matchups for the Eagles. So I'd maybe call this the third toughest matchup for Daniels this season. But I would project him in the 15 to 20 point range, where I think Russ and Herbert, they'll project, similarly, but have a higher ceiling. Sam, WalterPicks OG, I got you, man. Your thoughts on Devontae Adams and Jake Ferguson for Kelsey. Drop CJ Stroud for Herbert so I don't start Jaden Daniels. I think I would take Herbert over Stroud rest of season. I think. So I think I probably would do this. It's close. Definitely close. Like, I wouldn't drop Jaden Daniels to add Justin Herbert. I still think I'd probably prefer Jaden Daniels rest of season to Herbert. So I'm willing to take a slightly worse option for this week that could easily still end up being better. And then this trade here, you're clearly upgrading at tight end. Kelsey's definitely, especially if you need to make the fantasy playoffs still, Kelsey's going to help you do that in this trade. I have been advocating to sell Travis Kelsey basically all season, and that definitely could blow up my face. I mean, of all the takes I've had all season, and of course, I'm going to have some L takes. Everyone does. I will have my fair share of L's. And Kelsey could end up being one of my bigger L's of the season, depending how it plays out. But the reason I've been trying to sell Travis Kelsey all year, going all the way back to draft season where I did not draft him in a single league, even though he projects as tight end 1 right now, it's the fantasy football playoffs. That's why I'm nervous about Kelsey, because you go back to last season, you look at Kelsey last season, he was the number 1 tight end in fantasy last season by a decent margin, but he didn't win anyone leagues. Actually, if you had Kelsey, you almost definitely lost your fantasy league last year. He went under 10 points in all 3 fantasy football playoff games. He didn't have more than 5 catches in any of those games. And part of the reason was they were resting him a little bit, not giving him a huge workload as they geared up for what they actually care about, the actual NFL playoffs. And he destroyed in the actual NFL playoffs, went over 14 fantasy points in all those games. He went over 18 in the last 3 games of the season. I mean, he was destroying. He was a massive part of the Chiefs Super Bowl last year. I think we're going to see something similar this year, especially if the Chiefs win this week versus the Bills. Then they almost lock up the 1 seed this week with how easy their schedule is rest of season. Start Downs or pick up Elijah Moore? Yeah, definitely Downs. Should I start Daniels or Purdy? Yeah, it's Purdy. It's Purdy over Daniels. It's Lamar over Daniels, Hurts over Daniels, Allen over Daniels, Purdy over Daniels, Burrow, Russ, and Herbert over Daniels. And I could definitely eat my words here. Daniels has a real ceiling tonight. I know I was just saying we haven't seen the ceiling since week 4. It doesn't mean he doesn't have a ceiling in this game. I still think Daniels was basically built in a lab for fantasy football. If I were to go into a lab and build a quarterback for fantasy football, I think I would basically come out with Jaden Daniels in Anthony Richardson's body. That's the quarterback I would build. So he doesn't have the Richardson body, but he's got basically everything else. I mean, he is one of the most accurate deep passers already in the NFL. Last year in college football, he was the most accurate deep passer in the NFL, or in college football, excuse me. And we've seen that already at times this season. The matchup's just not great. That's part of the reason I would go with these other guys who are in fantastic spots. I mean, I think the Chargers-Bengals game on I think it's Sunday Night Football. I think that one got flexed to Sunday Night Football. I think this time's maybe wrong in the app from before. But that game is going to be extremely high scoring. I mean, I do not think the Bengals defense stops the Chargers. I'm not sure the Chargers defense, which has been good at times this season, stops the Bengals, especially if T. Higgins is back. Start Terry or Devonta. Yeah, I got Terry slightly over Devonta. It's close. But I think Terry's floor is better than Devontae Smith's floor, and they have comparable ceilings. And also, the Commanders are the underdogs tonight. They're 4-point underdogs. And I do think the Eagles win this game. I don't see the Commanders stopping the Eagles' rushing attack in this game. It's part of the reason we got Kenneth Gainwell, over 13.5 rushing yards, as the free player prop tonight. B-Rob or Najee? In PPR, yeah, this one's close. I think B-Rob right now projects better than Najee. Tough matchup for Najee this week. I did just see that Jaylen Warren popped up on the injury report with, I think, a new back injury. Let me pull this up quick because I think this will be in the app. Yeah, back, did not practice. Not great, folks. It's a bad enough to be added to the injury report on a Thursday, but it's even worse to be listed as it did not play. Warren can't put some concerns to rest regarding his week 11 availability. Yeah, I mean, this makes this start sit even harder because if Warren is out, and we got Warren projected in right now for 8 points on his own. I mean, the Ravens have been really good versus the running backs, but the Eagles have been too. I think I'd go Najee, honestly, over Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson coming off his own injury. I don't have a DFS lineup for you tonight, but I would say play Saquon in the captain slot. I expect that the team to take it down tonight probably either has Saquon in the captain slot or Jaden Daniels in the captain slot. I think there's definitely a route to Jaden Daniels exploding in this one. On the rushing side, Goddard or Gesicki. Oh, God, I think T. Higgins is back this week. I think I probably would go Goddard in that one. I don't think Gesicki's startable if T. Higgins is back. Hey, Sam, wanted a piece of this game with McBride on bye. I have Goddard in place. Disley's available, but he hasn't scored all season. LOL, you sure? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too overconfident here with Will Disley. You know, I want to check myself a little bit. I mean, the projection here is close. Dallas Goedert, I think, does have a little bit of a safer floor than Disley. They're in the app, they're projected very similar floors. Neither guy has a super high ceiling. We haven't seen Disley score a single time this season. Does he even have a red zone role? I mean, he did have an end zone target last week. He's had at least one red zone target in most of his recent games. It's close, man. This is close. It's a much better matchup, though, for Disley. Look at this matchup real quick. First, the Bengals. They rank second worst for tight ends. They just got destroyed by Mark Andrews, who was the tight end 2 last week. Bowers the week before that. Obviously, 2 very good tight ends. And Njoku was the tight end 1 when he played them. Even Kolar was a top 10 tight end. Why can't Disley do it? If Kolar can do it, you can do it too. If Charlie Kolar can do it, so can Will Disley, man. I'm okay going Will Disley over Goddard. I think it's fine. I just don't think there's a real ceiling for Goddard in this game. Again, there's a pretty decent chance we see like 20 pass attempts in this game. And then over half of those are probably going to Browning and Devontae Smith. And then another, 15-20% to the running backs. I think there's a decent shot. We actually see like a legit revenge game here from Jahan Dotson. When I say legit, prop breaking, over his 10-yard prop line. I don't think he's going for like a massive game or anything, but he definitely could be a little bit more involved this week with that revenge game narrative. I do think there's a real chance of that. I am team revenge game narrative sometimes. Pollard or Eckler? Yeah, that one's pretty close. Should I trade Kupp for Neighbors? I would take Neighbors over Kupp, yeah. Pollard versus Eckler is a really close one. I think they might be actually like back-to-back in the rankings. I think the answer here is Pollard. Yeah, it's Pollard. Pollard's going to get more work than Eckler. He's going to get more touches than Eckler, and he's in a tough matchup too versus the Vikings, but Eckler's in a really difficult matchup tonight versus the Eagles. The Eagles have been very, very good versus running backs, guys. We have not really seen big running back performances versus the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is really the big difference between these two teams. Is the Eagles' defense has been legit this season. They haven't played the best QBs, so this will be a pretty telling game tonight. But Bijan, he only had 16 points. Kamara only had 16 points. They're allowing the 4th fewest rushing touchdowns per game, the 8th fewest rushing yards per game, the 7th fewest receptions per game, the 4th fewest receiving yards per game to running backs. They haven't allowed a single receiving touchdown to running backs this season. And it's not like they haven't played good running backs. They played Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown. Not going to include Rico Dowdle on that list quite yet, but yeah, not a good matchup for the running backs. Should I actually Calvin Ridley or Devontae Smith? I think it's Ridley, man. I actually think that one is Ridley. I don't know if the WalterPicks app's going to agree with me on that one. It's probably close. I think I would play Ridley over both of these receivers, Devontae Smith and Terry McLaurin. I think Ridley is still a buy low in fantasy. I still feel like everyone, like the majority of people still think pretty down on Calvin Ridley. I don't think people are buying Calvin Ridley and the hype around Calvin Ridley over the last 3 weeks. I kind of am. I kind of have been. Honestly, since like 2-3 weeks ago. Because you look at the air yards. I mean, I can't ignore this view for Calvin Ridley if you're watching live on YouTube. If you're watching live on TikTok, come to the YouTube live, guys. It's a better viewing experience on YouTube. Link is right in the TikTok bio. We're looking at Calvin Ridley's game logs right now. And like, this is all I think you need to see to start Ridley. It's a better matchup for Ridley than McLaurin and Devontae Smith have tonight. Ridley's had at least 8 targets in 5 straight games. He has over 120 air yards in 5 straight games. Like, at a minimum, he's in one of the best roles in the league. And will he capitalize on that every week? That's not a guarantee. Does he still have kind of a scary floor? Because it's Calvin Ridley, and we've seen close to 0-point floors from Ridley in the past this season and last season. Sure, like, I'll give you that. But are both McLaurin and Devontae Smith locks to go over 120 air yards tonight on offenses that have been pretty run heavy, especially Devontae Smith? McLaurin versus Ridley, I think, is super close. And that's a pretty tough call with how consistent McLaurin's been as well. But I think I would play Ridley over both them personally. Terry McLaurin or Darnell Mooney? Yeah, I think that one's McLaurin over Mooney. I think I'd go McLaurin there. How do you think McLaurin realistically does tonight? Yeah, so I think that, pulling up McLaurin for a second here, we have not seen very many good receiver performances versus the Eagles. They're allowing the 5th fewest yards per game. We have not seen a single wide receiver go over 100 yards versus the Philadelphia Eagles since week 1, when Jaden Reed did it on only 4 catches. He had 138 yards and 4 catches. Man, I think that was the second game of the season, right? They played on a Friday or something. Man, that feels like a lifetime ago. I don't know about you guys. That feels like that feels like last season to me, thinking back to that Eagles Packers game from week 1. That was a fun game. Jaden Reed was with a wide receiver 1 in week 1 with 33 points, man. But we have seen some good performances. Chris Olave, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Mike Evans all went over 15 fantasy points. Jamar Chase, he had 20 points. Malik Neighbors, he only needed 8 points. I think like a 15-point, right around a 15-point projection is pretty reasonable for McLaurin tonight. We got him projected at 14 points. So yeah, 5 catches, 60 yards. I think that's the median outcome for McLaurin tonight. And that's basically what we've seen this season. That's part of the reason he's been so consistent is he had a couple, he saved, week 9, he had only 2 catches, but he scored on both of them. But every other game, he's had at least 4 catches. I mean, there's a real floor here for McLaurin. He's by far, it's really not close, the best receiver on the team. It is actually really like one of those situations, not quite to the extreme extent, of CeeDee Lamb and Malik Neighbors and George Pickens, of the gap from the best receiver to the next. McLaurin, I would say 12 to 14 max. Yeah, I don't think that's like an unreasonable take. The difference for McLaurin, he's clearly the best. Like, it goes from McLaurin to Noah Brown and Luke McCaffrey. I mean, it's a ridiculous gap. But they do spread the ball around a lot in this offense in comparison to some of those other offenses we just discussed. Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, De'Ami Brown. We got Noah Brown here twice. That's weird. Zacchaeus even will get some run. And then Eckler and B-Rob, they get involved in the pass game. Zach Ertz gets it very involved. And they also skew pretty run heavy. So there's not that many targets to even go around in the first place. In comparison to the Eagles, they're one of the most consolidated offenses in the NFL, especially when both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are healthy. It was even more extreme when Goddard was out. But there's frequently, like most weeks, you're seeing over 50% of the pass attempts go towards A.J. Brown and go towards Devontae Smith. Hey, Sam, should I be looking to move Jahmyr Gibbs before playoffs since Monty caps his ceiling? No, Alex, I don't think so. I don't think you need to move Gibbs. And part of the reason is actually like the opposite side of this exact thing, Alex, where I think if you go down the list of every team and you think about the contingent upside, the upside of if another player on this team, a specific player on this team misses time, what happens to the other players? I don't think there's two players with more contingent upside than Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. If one of these guys misses time and you have the other one in fantasy, you're just going to win. Like, you're going to win your league. You're going to be in the hunt to win your league. They get the Bills in week 15, who are allowing the most receptions per game to running backs this season. Did that matchup alone just for Gibbs, regardless of if Montgomery misses time or not? Obviously, it's impossible to know if that's going to happen. But if it does, Gibbs becomes maybe the best running back in fantasy, especially in this week 15 matchup. But even with Montgomery in, that matchup versus the Bills is a smash spot for Gibbs. I mean, you're going to have a pretty good chance, I think, to advance to the fantasy semifinals with Gibbs. And he's got 2 good matchups coming up too. He's already through the bye. He's going to help you make the playoffs if you need to make it still. And I think he's going to really help in that first round of the playoffs in week 15 with Gibbs. What's your prediction on Eckler? Yeah, I'm very scared to start Eckler and B-Rob tonight. Let's recap real quick before we wrap up the live. Man, this one went fast. Let me recap real quick to try to get to all the starts I wasn't able to answer directly. So Jalen Hurts, Saquon, A.J. Brown, you're starting these guys no matter what for sure. Jaden Daniels is a good start, not a must start. The quarterbacks I am personally starting over Jaden Daniels this week: Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, and Justin Herbert. Then it's Daniels, end of list. Terry McLaurin, pretty good floor. I mean, he has been one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy, but this is not a good matchup for the Commanders offense just across the board. The Eagles have not allowed too many massive wide receiver performances, but I still think McLaurin's a good start. Not a must start in all spots, but a good start. I would start him over Devontae Smith, who I also think is a decent start tonight. Dallas Goedert, I really think is closer to must bench territory than likely worth it territory tonight. I would start Will Dissly and Taysom Hill over Dallas Goedert. I think that says about enough there. Brian Robinson Jr., I think in some leagues you kind of just have to start him, but this is a scary matchup for him coming off the hamstring injury, first game back in 2 weeks. He ranks as running back 24. Tony Pollard, Dobbins, James Cook are the guys ahead of him. I might start Dowdle over him. I think I would start Najee Harris over him if I had to make that call tonight, since Jalen Warren might not play now. Travis Etienne, I think I would play over him too, because I think Tank Bigsby might miss. I would play him over Tajay Spears. I'd play him over Eckler. Eckler, I don't think you can start tonight with how good the Eagles have been versus running backs and with Brian Robinson back. I think both guys are risky because they're going to spread the ball across these two running backs, across Jaden Daniels on the ground, and they have Jeremy McNichols play still too when both these guys are active. Zach Ertz is a must bench in this revenge game tonight. He had 8 targets last week. I still think I'd play Dissly and Taysom over him. I think there's an argument his floor is maybe a bit better than those guys, but what is the ceiling? That's my question for you. If you're starting Zach Ertz tonight, think about the best possible scenario for Ertz tonight. He falls into the end zone twice, which he hasn't come even close to doing all season. How many touchdowns does he have this season? He's won. Yeah, I'm really the underlying usage. Look at this for Zach Ertz. I mean, it's all green. It looks great, but there's just not a ceiling for 34-year-old Zach Ertz in this revenge game tonight. So yeah, I want to bench Eckler and Zach Ertz. And Jahan Dotson, I kind of like the Jahan Dotson revenge game narrative tonight for the props, but you're obviously not starting him. Devontae Smith over Aaron Jones in the flex. No, I don't think I'd do that. I think I'd go Aaron Jones in the flex there. Yeah, I'd play Ferguson over both tight ends tonight. I would play Chubb over Goddard easily. Do not flex Goddard. Trade Lamb, Kamara, and Ingram for Nico Gibbs and for 4 and 6 and need to win a lot. Lamb's already through the bye. I mean, you got Gibbs. Is he through the bye? I think he was. We just looked at that. Nico, the Texans, they're through the bye, I think, too. No, they're not. You're upgrading from Lamb to Nico. You're downgrading from Kamara to Gibbs, but it's not a huge downgrade. And then Ingram and Ferg is kind of lateral. I mean, it's a fair trade, Peyton. It's a fair trade. I don't think this clearly, though, helps you win more now. I think it's a pretty lateral trade and fair deal across the board there. All right, the free player prop tonight, if you missed it, it is Kenneth Gainwell over 13.5 rushing yards. We are at 63% on the free player props. It's week 11 at this point. We got a decent volume of props in on these lives. I feel pretty good about this one. The Commanders allowing the most rushing yards per game, allowing the most yards per carry per game. We just need at least three carries from Gainwell tonight. He's at least 5 in 4 straight games. That is carries. I think the key for the Commanders tonight to stay in this game is get pressure on Jalen Hurts. Force the Eagles to throw, and then get pressure on Jalen Hurts, something they've been very good at this season. Second best in pressure rate, and Hurts has not been as good under pressure, and he's been under pressure a lot, the most of his career at 43%. I think this is an interesting narrative to watch if the Commanders can get an upset tonight. On the flip side of that Commanders defense, though, again, they've been crushed on the ground, and I don't know the Eagles are going to be forced to pass. I'm not convinced they're going to need to pass much in this game to have success. And at times this season, they've shown a willingness to just run a lot and really lean on the run. And the Commanders, they also have played a lot of man coverage this season, which I don't think will bode well for them in this game if they end up playing man coverage. Devontae Smith versus Jennings, yeah, this one's close, man. I honestly don't think it's crazy to go Jennings here. I think Jennings is also, I was talking about Devontae Smith, one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. Juwan Jennings, is on that list too. I actually think personally I would go Jennings over Devontae Smith in this game, partially because of the pass volume concerns for the Eagles. I have no pass volume concerns really for the 49ers. I guess it's possible they blow out the Seahawks. They're probably even bigger favorites. Let's see, the 49ers. Yeah, they are bigger favorites at home versus the Seahawks. But Purdy's been throwing a ton. And Jennings, he's the primary X receiver for the 49ers right now. You look at the yards per route run metrics, he ranks 6th best. Listen to this list. The NFL leaders in yards per route run: A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, Devontae Adams, and then Juwan Jennings. He's ahead of Justin Jefferson. McLaurin's on that list too. Man, I mean, tough call between McLaurin, Devontae Smith, Juwan Jennings. But yeah, I'm not benching Juwan Jennings right now. We've seen 2 games that Jennings has played this season without one of Debo or Ayuk. And in both games, he smashed. Both games, he went for massive target shares, massive role. He's played great. Burrow, Jaden Daniels, that's Burrow. Again, the QBs, Lamar, Hurts, Allen, Purdy, Burrow, Wilson, and Herbert. I'm playing all over Daniels. Pick order here. Devontae, Judy, or Dowdle happy? Yeah, it's this order. I think it's this order. Man, is Dowdle really ahead of either of these guys? I don't think I'm ready to go there. Also, like, I get that I saw everyone freaking out about the report. Dowdle's in a workhorse role right now. Is he really in a workhorse role? I mean, wasn't he already the lead back? That was the quote, right? That he was the lead back now? Was he not the lead back before? They said he needs to touch the ball. I mean, he's been, I don't know. I'm not fully convinced on this coach speak. I got to look more into it potentially. 15 or more opportunities in his last 2 games. He's been pretty good over his last 2. I mean, he had a big game in week 9. I guess his floor, Dowdle has the best floor. It's half PPR here too. That actually probably changes it a decent bit. I missed that. Appreciate you letting me know the scoring settings. Part of the reason the WalterPicks app is so powerful is it will adjust for your scoring settings. That's why you got to download the WalterPicks app, guys. It is in the TikTok bio, in the YouTube description. Yeah, it's still Devontae though here. I'm going Josh Allen. TD score tonight. I think my favorite dart throw TD score tonight is Jahan Dotson. Again, I kind of do like that revenge game narrative. You're getting, I think, plus 700 or 800 odds on that one. I think that's a very sneaky one, but the lock is Saquon. I'd be pretty surprised if Saquon doesn't score. That's my time, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Time is the most valuable thing we have. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight. Good luck, everyone. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll see you all Sunday morning. Have a good one, guys.